Hey, in this video I'm going to show you about macros, what they are and how they can be used in the FANUC environment. Hey, so the first thing, what is a macro? A macro is a program that we've decided we're going to use quite often, or we want easily accessible. So in this case with the robot, I have a macro where I can toggle the gripper of the robot just with the use of a key. So to create a macro, we can open up our select screen. Just like we would create a program, we would go to create and then select and then name a program just like I've got up here. Inside that program, for subtype, we would select it as a macro. Although if we just create it as a program and then later on decide to make it up, leave it as none so it defaults to a TP program. And then later on we want to create a macro. Using that program, it'll automatically change it over to a macro subtype. Now you notice in this particular program, I have all of the motion groups masked. And that is important depending on which type of motion group you want to use. And that becomes important depending on how you want to use your macro program, which I'll explain here later. So once our program is created, once we've got our program created, we go ahead and populate it with the set of instructions that we would like it to perform. Okay, let's go ahead and look at how I would set up a macro. So I go to my menu, select setup, and then over to my macro in the fly up menu, and that brings me to my macro table. So you can see here, this is where I've got my first macro set up, and it's set up to my user key 1. Go ahead and set up a similar type of macro. I'm going to call it toggle grip 2. And then here in the programs column, I get the option of selecting a choice. And then here in the choice menu, it brings up the programs that are available for the different file types. And I want a file type of a macro, since that's how I set up my grip toggle program. So I'm going to select my grip toggle program. And then I come to the assignments column and I can select user key. Like I mentioned in how we set up the program, if we set it up so that there aren't any motions or we've masked out all the motion groups, then we can use this user key function, which allows us to use the keys on our teach pendant that can trigger a macro without having to hit the shift key. So I'm going to set this up for the user key 2, which would be this tool 2 key on my teach pendant. So now that I've got that set up, I should just be able to toggle the button and my gripper toggles open and closed. Okay, now I want to show you how to set up a macro that involves motion. So I've already set up a program that moves my robot to a maintenance position that I've set up as a position register. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead on my macros table and I'm going to go ahead and create a new macro assignment. And then on the programs column, I'm going to select my main program that contains the motion to go to the maintenance position. And now here on my macro assignment, I'm going to select a shift user key. Since that program has motion in it, I have to use the shift and then a user key in order to trigger the macro. And so I'm going to use user key 1, which would be this tool 1. That without the shift user key would just toggle the gripper, but with the shift user key, it's going to go to that maintenance position. Okay, now that that's been assigned, I'm going to go ahead and test it by hitting shift and tool 1, and there we have the robot moving to the maintenance position. Just one more note about our macros, in a way that we can use them is within the programming environment. We can also call in a macro program, similar like we would to call in a subroutine. So I'm going to go to a program that I've already created, maintenance square, and if I wanted to call in at the very beginning a macro program, I could come into my instruction, scroll over to macro, and then it would ask which macro I would want to call in. So now when this program is executed, it'll get to line 3 and it will call this macro, the macro that we've assigned to this, which would be that maintenance position. It would call that in as part of the program. And then once it's done, it'll return back to the program, just like we would with a subroutine and a call statement. All right, so hopefully that's helped in shedding some light on macros and how they can be used and what we would use them to do.